There we go. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being here. My name is Phil Rawlins. I'm the president and part owner of Orlando City Soccer Club, and thank you again for attending this afternoon. We're here this afternoon to share with you the highlights of a recent economic impact study that we completed. And let me begin by introducing the team to you and the people we have here today. The presentation, the study was put together by CS&L in conjunction with the Pizzuti Group. CS&L is the country's leading economic analyst in this area, working particularly in the areas of sports, entertainment, and leisure. And along with the Pizzuti Group, who are owners, representatives, and project managers for this project, we assembled this study, the results of which and the highlights of which we'll have available for you at the end of the press conference. But first of all, let me, for a moment, just talk about the opportunity that this affords us. We have a tremendous opportunity here in Orlando. We have a fantastic opportunity to bring a second pro Major League sports franchise to this city. And it's an opportunity that will not last forever. It's certainly got a timestamp on it. But we have that opportunity today. We lead the opportunity to take a major franchise here to the city and to be the 20th or 21st Major League franchise in the country. And that's an opportunity I think we have to grab with both hands and make the very, very most of. And that's what we're here to do. And hopefully Orlando City can bring that home in the next few months and years. Let me just take a second to introduce you to the agenda and just walk through what we'll be covering today. I'm going to spend a moment or two on the project itself and how we put this together. And then secondarily, talk about the transition from United Soccer Leagues to Major Soccer League and what that means. Last but not least, we'll get into the detail of the report and we'll cover the economic impact itself. And Brian Parker, who's here with me, will be covering the economic impact study for you. Let's start with the project overview. Orlando City commissioned CS&L to look at the opportunity for a multi-purpose 20,000-seat venue in the city of Orlando and what that would mean from an economic standpoint to the city and to the region. And let me for a second talk about multi-purpose venue. I've been trying to coach myself for the last few months not to call this a soccer-specific stadium. And the reason for that, quite frankly, is if I'm honest with you, I don't know what a soccer-specific stadium is. Really, we're talking about a stadium of around 18 to 20,000, where we have stands that are covered by a roof. So we're not talking about a domed or enclosed stadium here, but a roof over the stands to keep the vagaries of the weather, if you will, in Central Florida off the fans. So to keep the rain off them and keep the sunshine off them. That's a traditional South American or European design. And it's a design that's become extremely popular within the MLS itself in North America. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about a soccer-specific stadium. The truth is, it's also a multi-purpose stadium, and it's a multi-purpose venue that could be a tremendous asset to this community. Not only could we play soccer there, we could play international soccer games there, we can play visiting teams who come into this country who want to play and play Orlando City, could be housed there. We could play lacrosse there, we could play rugby there, we could play high school state finals and championships there. So it really is a facility that could be utilized for a lot of sports and also concerts as well and other entertainment opportunities. So think of it, if you will, as an 18 to 20,000 multi-purpose venue. And that's what we're talking about here. And that's what the core of the study was about. For the basis of and the purpose of this study, it is assumed that the location of the stadium would be somewhere in the city of Orlando. No specific site, but within the city of Orlando itself. The purpose of the study is to see how we can become the 20th or 21st franchise within Major League Soccer. And I'll talk more about that in a moment and the opportunity that we have there. And last but not least, you'll see on the slide there the basis of the stadium itself. It would cost between about 95 and 100 million. As we said, 18 to 20,000 seats. About 1,000 of those would be club seats. About 25 suites for corporate purposes and entertaining and hospitality. So let's talk a little bit about the opportunity we have with MLS. The map here shows the location of the existing 19 franchises within the system. As you can see, there's a major gap in the southeast quadrant of the United States. That's pretty much a quarter of the population that doesn't have direct access to Major League Soccer at the moment. That is something that the Major League Soccer office in New York is very clear about wanting to put right, and to put at least one, if not two, franchises down in that bottom southeast corridor. Orlando City right now leads the path to that 20th or 21st franchise. We have a tremendous opportunity to make that a franchise that's based here in Central Florida, an opportunity to bring, as we said, Major League Soccer here. The path we're taking is a very well-trodden path. There are 4 clubs who've transitioned from the United Soccer Leagues, the league we presently play in, to Major League Soccer. So let's take a look at the history of those and what we can learn from their transition from, if you like, the minor leagues to the major leagues in soccer. And I think this slide really starts to tell a story for itself. The 4 teams that we've had make that transition are on the left-hand side there. They're the Montreal Impact, the Portland Timbers, Seattle Sounders, and the Vancouver Whitecaps. As you can see in the first column, you'll see their average attendance in the last year that they played in the United Soccer Leagues, the league that we play in now. And as you can see, we've got the Seattle Sounders at 3,300 average, Vancouver Whitecaps around 5,000 average. And on the right-hand side, you'll see their first season within the MLS, and you'll see what a tremendous jump they had in attendance from USL to MLS. This has been proven over the last 5 years as these clubs have made that transition. So this is not a one-off, it's a trend, and it's a trend that we see ourselves repeating here in Orlando. At the moment, we're averaging close to 7,000 fans for a regular season game. The transition that these clubs have undergone has been an average percentage jump of 325%. So again, it's really not that difficult to work out. 325% from 7,000 means we'd easily fill an 18,000 stadium on a very, very regular basis. Let me point out a few things behind these numbers, a few facts, if you will. The reason the Portland Timbers average there is 18,800 is because they can only get 18,827 fans in their stadium. In fact, they've sold out for 35 straight games now. The Seattle Sounders on Sunday, I don't know if any of you were watching the TV on Sunday night, Seattle Sounders hosted the second highest regular attendance for a Major League Soccer game in this country when they had 66,400 for the game against the Portland Timbers. Truth of that game is really it was a dead rubber. Portland can't make the playoffs, and Seattle have already made the playoffs. So there's really nothing on the line for that game other than pride and a local trophy called the Cascadia Cup. But even so, with nothing really on the line from a league standpoint, they ended up with 66,400 fans, a tremendous, tremendous achievement. And that continues to go throughout the league. Major League Soccer has seen its attendance grow year upon year, and now is the 3rd best attended sport in this country, ahead of the NBA and the National Hockey League, and only just behind Major League Baseball and the NFL. So it's growing and growing very well and doing very well for itself across the country, except, as we say, in the southeastern corridor, and that's something that we want to put right. This slide just goes into a little more detail. You'll have these in your packs, but this shows the last 5 years for each of those clubs. You can see very clearly from the diagram how the attendance jumps as soon as you put Major League in front of the sport. So at that point, let me turn it over to Brian Parker, and Brian will walk you through some of the highlights of the economic impact study. Brian.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil, and thanks everyone for being here and taking some time to listen to this. As Phil mentioned, the club retained CSL International to do a preliminary economic impact analysis of the potential MLS franchise here in Orlando, and in the greater region of Orlando. For purposes of this analysis, it's assumed that the stadium is located in the city. That has not been determined yet or defined yet. It's just to show the city, county, and statewide economic impacts. Very briefly, I want to walk through the methodology a little bit. We start with the direct spending, which is all the spending that takes place either in the stadium, directly related to the events, outside the stadium as you're coming or going from events, and then during construction as well. What CSL does then is also take a couple of cuts to that number to bring the gross direct spending number down to a net new economic impact number, really focusing on what the specific impacts of a facility is going to generate. When you start with the gross spending, you make an adjustment for displacement, spending that would normally have taken place within the community anyhow. And then also for leakage, spending that takes place outside of the community for concerts, for instance. Those revenues don't necessarily impact the local community. Again, we take those cuts to the different layers of spending to determine the net new numbers. And then we come up with our outputs: total output, number of jobs supported, personal earnings, and tax revenues. The first round of impact starts with the construction of the facility, and this would take place over approximately a 24-month period. Again, we've looked at a generic stadium template of about $95 million project cost. Of that project cost, about 45% would be labor, 55% materials, and then we, again, cut to what we think is going to be spent locally versus not local, coming down to about $69 million spent locally on materials and labor. That $69 million would generate about $116 million in total output, support about 890 jobs over the period, generate about $46 million in personal earnings, and about $5.5 million in tax revenues. And then once you get into operations of the stadium, CSL put together some high-level preliminary estimates on the events that could take place there and attendance of those events, primarily focusing on MLS soccer games, but as Phil mentioned, also other types of events that could take place there, other soccer matches that might be international friendlies, U.S. soccer, women's soccer, NCAA soccer, concerts to some extent, and then other events, maybe high school soccer or other sports that could take place there. On an annual basis, the stadium is estimated to generate about $42 million in gross direct spending. Again, we adjust that downwards so that the city, if the stadium is located in the city, it's going to generate about $24 million in new spending, $15 million in new spending to the county, and $9 million in new spending to the state. Over the 30-year term of the potential debt or the 30-year life of the stadium, however you want to look at it, those numbers are obviously multiplied out. The net annual MPV of those numbers is about $40 million in output for the city, $27 million in county output, and $16 million to the state. 390 jobs supported within the city, 250 for the county, and 140 for the state. Again, 18 million in earnings for the city, and all the way down to 7 million for the state. On a 30-year basis, then, the net present value of that would be about $1.3 billion in gross spending. Within the city, about $711 million, $460-some million in county, $281 million in the state. Generates anywhere from $482 to $1.2 billion in total output, $222 to $565 million in earnings, and $9 million all the way up to $29 million in tax revenues. And that's the economic impact numbers. We'll be up for questions later. And Phil, I think you want to close it out here?
As you can see from Brian's presentation there's a significant economic impact and economic benefit to not only the region but also the city of Orlando in working with us on doing this. But there's also other significant benefits that we really want to touch upon here. And I want to close on this last slide, which is, if you like, the non-economic impact and the non-economic benefits of what we're proposing. Let's take a second to look at this for a moment. First of all, I think what we're talking about here is a source of economic pride. A source of civic pride. The city at the moment only has one Major League Pro franchise, and we're in the building of that, the Amway Center, where the Magic play. This is an opportunity to bring a second Major League franchise here to the city, and a great opportunity to build civic pride amongst the citizens who've already come out and supported the club in such great numbers for our last 2 years. Secondly, we have the opportunity to attract new businesses and to bring new companies to the area. When companies are coming in, obviously sport is a major attraction. It's a major opportunity for them. It's something that attracts new companies, it attracts employees. Third, and I think this is a really important point, we do have the opportunity to bring tremendous awareness to Orlando in the international community because of the game of soccer. Soccer is if you like, the world's game. It's played all over the world. It's played in every country of the world. It's followed avidly in all those countries. And as we bring international soccer games here, as we bring international teams here, as we bring national teams here, we increase the profile and awareness of not only Orange County, Central Florida, but also the city of Orlando. We've also got, obviously, the potential to host international friendly games, U.S. women's soccer, NCAA Final Four games, high school championships, you name it. If we had a facility of this size and of this stature, then the opportunity to host these games is pretty much limitless. And last but not least, it gives us the opportunity to work with our foundation in the community to give back to the people of Central Florida and the city of Orlando the way we have in the last 2 years. In wrapping up, there's just a couple of last points I'd like to make. And first of all, it's about CSNL. I said at the beginning that CSNL was one of the leading, if not the leading, economic impact analysts in the country, specializing in the area of sports and leisure. They worked on the economic impact study for the Amway Center. They worked on the economic impact study for the refurbishment and the rebuild of the Citrus Bowl. They also worked on the economic impact study for the Performing Arts Center here in downtown. So not only do they have a tremendous track record across the country, but they're extremely well known to the populace of Orlando and Central Florida itself. And last but not least, I just want to thank all of you for attending today. Brian, myself, Bill Roeder from CSNL are here, happy to answer your questions. Also happy to take those questions offline and do any one-on-one interviews that the press wants to do as well. So at that point, I'll open it up to the floor. Mm-hmm.
United States, of which have failed. What sets your team apart? What sets your plan apart? Why will it work this time? And why does the MLS think it will work?
That's a good question. There's a few parts to that. Let me see if I do my very best to answer it. It's really not what's different about our team. I think the first part I would start with is what's different about Major League Soccer today than when those teams really failed 10, 12 years ago. And what's different is that Major League Soccer is in a very, very different place than it was back then. Its attendance is growing. Its popularity is growing. Its coverage on the television is growing. All throughout the country, we're seeing a surge and a growth within the game, not only in attendances, but interest in the game. As we said earlier, it's now the most popular game in the country, and it's the third best attended sport. That wasn't the case at the time. It's fair to say that at the time that Tampa and Miami failed, the league was probably at its lowest low. And since then, it's risen and consistently risen each year on year to be the league it is today. So I think the first part of the answer to the question lies within the league itself. It's in a much better position economically, financially, stability-wise, and everything else, and certainly very much in a growth phase, as we see from the franchise prices that have gone up consistently over the last 10 years or so. So that's part one. Part two is Orlando does not have the baggage of the other cities. And please bear this in mind, those cities will be competitors for this. If we don't get Major League Soccer here in Orlando, the chances are it will go to Atlanta or Tampa or Miami or Nashville. But Major League Soccer will have two franchises in the Southeast within the next couple of years. That's for sure. Our opportunity is to make sure that one of those is here in Central Florida, in Orlando in particular. We're in a much better position, I think, to take advantage of where the league is today. We're set up as if you like, a mini MLS club right now. Our organizational structure, our functions, the way we operate, the way we organize ourselves is set up for success within the MLS system. So I think we're in the right place at the right time. If we can take advantage of that, I don't see any reason why a franchise here in Florida this time around can't be extremely successful as it has been in the rest of the country.
Their increase in attendance that first year. Do you have economic on those teams, and where does Orlando compare to that?
I don't have it to hand. We can certainly get it for you. I know that all of them did do some form of economic impact study, whether it was to refurbish a stadium or build a new one. So that data does exist. I think the one city I would point to on that list of 4 is Portland. because Portland is geographically and demographically similar size to Orlando. So it's a good comparison, if you will. It's also a good comparison in the fact that it also has an NBA team, and that's pretty much the only other professional major league sports team it has within the city. So it's a good comparison from that standpoint too. Portland increased their stadium this year to be just over 20,000 in capacity, and again have sold it out on a week-to-week, game-to-game basis. So I think I said earlier they're looking at about 35 straight games now where they've sold out the stadium. I don't see any reason why we can't emulate the success that they've had within Portland. It's certainly turned into a soccer city. They're rabid soccer fans. They're very much behind the team and are out there every week supporting them. We've got that catalyst today. You know, we've got 7,000 every week attending our home games. You know, we've got 3,500 season ticket holders. There's no reason why we can't jump from those numbers to numbers like Portland. In fact, when I was in Portland earlier last year, we met with the ownership group there. They told me that the year before they moved to the MLS, it was announced that they were moving to the MLS, their season ticket base was 1,500 season tickets. We're already at 3,500 season ticket holders. There is no reason whatsoever why we can't emulate Portland's success. Good question. And by the way, it's not to say the Citrus Bowl isn't good enough. It's going to be a good stadium. I was fortunate enough to be part of the workshop on the rebuilding that we were looking at a few weeks ago, and it's going to be a tremendous facility. The issue is not one of the Citrus Bowl itself. It's the fact that it's going to end up being a 60 to 65,000 open bowl that isn't really made for soccer and made for the unique environment and atmosphere of soccer. And what the MLS, and it's right in doing this, what the MLS has pointed out to us and said very, very clearly is, you know, for you to be successful, for a franchise to be successful in this country, there's a path now to follow, and it's very clear. The stadium needs to be in an urban setting, and it needs to be around about 20,000, and you need to put a roof over the fans because the fans are part of the experience. Unlike any other game in this country, the fans are part of the experience of the game. They're part of the excitement and the power of soccer. And so we've got to give them an environment where they can excel, where they can do the things that they do, where they can make the noise that they make and the atmosphere that they make that creates the unique atmosphere and the unique structure of soccer. So it's not that the Citrus Bowl won't be a perfectly good stadium, be a great stadium. The MLS just won't allow us to play there if we want to be a major league franchise. And they've been pretty clear with us on that.
Does the cart come before the horse then? Does MLS give us the franchise first and say, while you're building a stadium, you can have the franchise, or vice versa?
Again, a good question. And let me tag those two together if I can for a moment, because Major League Soccer has made it very clear to us that they're quite happy for us to play in the Citrus Bowl for a short period of time whilst a new stadium gets built. And let's be clear, we don't need the stadium finished and complete and ready to go tomorrow in order to get a major league franchise for the city of Orlando. But we do need to be able to point to a viable plan as to how that stadium is getting built, where it's getting built, and when it will be completed. And then if that's the case, they're quite happy for us to play in the Citrus Bowl in the short term. Sorry.
Yeah, what's the next step in getting into MLS? Just as far as taking that next step into a professional environment and getting a stadium, and what do you guys have to do as an organization?
You know, we're in great shape to do that right now. As you know, Jeff, we operate pretty much as a mini MLS organization today, from our setup, our infrastructure, our training facilities, our front office facilities are all there. We just got to build on the numbers that we have within the organization to really become MLS. Our next steps really are to sit down with the city and the county and to figure out, we've always said from day one, we'd love to see this as a private-public partnership. We're not asking the city and the county to fund this. We're looking for a private-public partnership to make this happen. And therefore, our next steps are really to sit down with them. We've had two great meetings. Well, we've had several very, very good meetings, but the two I'm referring to are the recent visits to Kansas City with the Mayor Dyer's team from the city of Orlando. And then a recent visit this weekend to Philadelphia with Mayor Jacobs and her team. And that was a wonderful opportunity to share with them what a unique situation these two stadiums are in, the Kansas City Stadium and the Philadelphia Stadium. What a wonderful environment they create, and what a great atmosphere they create. And just, what you can do with a stadium of that size for other sports and concerts and all the purposes that you can put within that stadium. So it's been invaluable to make those visits. Our next step's really now to sit down with them and figure out how can we collaborate and work together to make this a reality and take advantage of that opportunity I mentioned in the opening address.
I understand that in Los Angeles and Ohio, they raised all of the money privately. Is that something that would be possible here?
It's certainly a possibility. We wouldn't take that beyond the realms of possibility, but it's also true to say that most of the other stadiums, in fact, the vast majority of the stadiums have been built within the MLS have been some form of private-public partnership, or in certain cases actually completely publicly funded, as the case with Kansas City. So it's really varied across the country from 100% public funding, where there's been a real estate development play in place, then there's obviously been more of a carrot there for someone to do a private funding as well.
Quickly rattle through all of the other events that could be held there, high school games, concerts. How important is that to get those other partners to make this a feasible reality? And wouldn't that not compete with the venues, including the one we're sitting in right now?
I think most of the things that we've looked at on that chart and that we consulted with CSNL on are really outdoor sports opportunities. So not so much a competition with the Amway Center per se, but an opportunity to bring things that we can put into a small purpose-built venue that's very suitable for them. So, for example, I'll take one example. The NCAA Final Four in soccer. There's no reason why we shouldn't be hosting that in the city of Orlando. There's no reason why we shouldn't have that in Central Florida. This year's competition is going to take place at the beginning of December, and it's going to be housed in Philadelphia. I don't know if you've been to Philadelphia at the beginning of December, but it's not the best place to sit outside for 12 or 15,000 people. We have that unique environment. Taking advantage of the weather we have here and the climate we have here, there isn't any reason why we shouldn't bring any number of events like that one to a facility like this to make these numbers work.
Without those events, can this stadium sustain MLS strictly?
Yes, believe it absolutely can. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to house those events as well. They're a combination of really three things. One is 20-odd fixtures, or 20-odd, sorry, use my English there for a second, 20-odd games a year for the MLS team, and then a number of international friendlies or exhibition games, which we play right now, by the way, so that's really not a stretch at all. The second part of it is other sports. Lacrosse, we mentioned rugby. We had an inquiry just this past couple of weeks about the women's national team coming to Orlando. Again, there's no reason why we shouldn't bring those games and play them in a 20,000-seat facility like we're proposing. And then last but not least, it talked about a small number of concerts. The concert number is one we've based upon consultation with other MLS teams, and we've been very, very conservative, as we have with all these numbers. I think if you look back in your packs, it says about 5 concerts, which is by far and away the lowest number that any of the MLS teams are currently doing within their stadium. So we've been very conservative about that participation.
Orlando recently struggled just to get the funding for the Citrus Bowl, the Performing Arts Center, all of that. What conversations have you had with Dyer and Jacobs, and what have they said about the possibility of actually getting some private funding, and whether that's outside the realm of possibility or not?
We haven't actually gone there with them quite yet, Joe. We've had some initial discussions, and I know both the county and the city are very excited about the possibility and the opportunity, but that's really a part of our next steps. We'll be sitting down with them in the next few months to discuss that in more detail.
So is there a timetable that the MLS has given you in that, okay, you could be in the Citrus Bowl for this long, but a soccer-specific stadium or multi-purpose stadium must be constructed by 20, have they given you some type of timetable? Is it, 5 years in the Citrus Bowl, you have this many years for the big stadium?
They haven't actually given us a specific timetable, because obviously some part of that is for us to feed back to them when construction can begin and when construction ends. So it's a little bit dependent upon us to give them those numbers. What they've been very clear about is that in the short term, they're happy to see us play in a stadium like the Citrus Bowl, But as long as it is recognized in the longer term or the medium term, there's a plan in place to move to a, shall we say, soccer-specific or multi-purpose venue around the 20,000 mark.
What sort of amount of public money are you looking at?
Again, right now, that's at the very early stages. What we've said to them all along is we would be happy to sit down with you and do a private-public partnership on this. Really we're at the stage now where we have to figure out what each of us can bring to the table to make this work and the timeframes around that.
This might be a question more for the other gentleman. The economic study impact, 1.3 billion overall over 30 years. It seems it's a nice big number, but does that change depending on where you put the stadium?
The $1.3 billion was the gross spending, gross net present value of that. So that's not what the real net new impact is. I think that off the top of my head, I think that number was from output. I'm sorry, the 1.2 billion is in the city. If it's not in the city, that number would not happen. The county number, the $800 million, would be the economic impact number if it's not located in the city. Okay, we tried to look at a city-located stadium initially. CSL looked at a city-located stadium to encompass all of the potential impacts, city, county, and state.
Have you had any site surveys and what would be the most appropriate places here in the city?
We have not as yet. Obviously, a number of locations have been thrown around. I'm sure you've probably seen some of them in the press and some of them talked about on websites and the like. But no, we haven't located a specific location. As we said, a number of things have been bandied about, but we're not at that stage yet where we can say it definitely has to be here or it's got to be there. Again, that's part of the next steps that we're looking as to where we actually do locate it and what's available to us.
Has the MLS seen this and have they responded?
Yes, they have seen it. They've had a copy of it. We're in regular, when I say regular, probably weekly contact and discussion with the MLS about our progress and about the working towards an MLS franchise with them. So they get to see pretty much everything that we do. We signed a non-disclosure with them about 18 months ago. So these numbers have been shared with them, and they're very excited about the work that CSNL did and the opportunity of working with Orlando to make this happen.
Has the MLS said if you get a stadium, you can get a franchise?
Pretty much. Yeah, they can't come out and say that clearly as you just put the question, but in every other way, yes, they've said, if you do the right things, this is yours. This is yours to take. So it's for us to grab that opportunity with both hands.
UCF has a great soccer program. Have you been in touch with anybody from UCF about using Bright House Stadium in the interim?
We've not. I think there may be some issues there. I'm not fully versed on it, so please don't quote me on it, but I think there was some covenants that were placed on the use of the stadium that I'm not fully versed with. And also there is the way the stadium is constructed. It really was constructed just simply for American football. And what I mean by that is the size of the stadium, whether it could actually hold a big enough soccer field. That would be a thing we'd have to look into, obviously, with the assistance of UCF if we were to use that. Any other questions? Okay. If not, I'd like to close by thanking Brian and thanking CSNL for all their hard work in this. And thank you again for coming out this afternoon. If you want to spend some time one-on-one with any of us, we'll all be here to take your questions. Thank you.